Tá, estamos ao vivo. Boa tarde, que eu ainda não
Boa tarde.
jantei, portanto tinha boa tarde.
Quase boa
Boa
noite.
tarde, objeto. Hello, Samson.
Hello, Diego.
So, como podem ver, hoje temos o Samson mal e vamos fazer isto em inglês. E espero que gostem. E vamos já passar para inglês. So, hello, Samson. So, first of all,
Hi, Diego.
let me just again say thank you so much for accepting our invitation to come to our humble podcast. So, and to give you like a framing of what we are. So we started as a small Bitcoin beach project. So I got inspired by the Bitcoin Beach project, and I thought it would be a cool idea to make like a Bitcoin beach in Portugal. So I live near the beach, and the place where I live relates to El Zonte. So initially the project started as Bitcoin Beach Portugal. So, and later on we decided that the Bitcoin Beach wasn't gonna scale. It wasn't gonna scale well. So give me just. I have some technical problems. Kids, but
I can pick up on that.
I thought Bitcoin Beach wasn't going to scale for the whole country. So it's a really small country, well, compared to the States or Canada or whatever. So it's, if you want to scale it to the rest of the country, Bitcoin Beach the part of the beach is not going to play well. So we rebranded it to A Seita Bitcoin. So A Seita Bitcoin in Portuguese is like take Bitcoin. And the name of the podcast, which can be read as A Seita Bitcoin also, but it's like a word play on the part of A Seita, because if you separate it like we do in the podcast, it's called like the cult or the sept of Bitcoin. So
The
it's
Bitcoin
just
cult.
like the Bitcoin cult, like a word play. So and we are starting. There's not too much adoption. So I onboarded just like a couple of merchants. Well, more than a couple, but it's really starting. But it's difficult because we are, well, in Europe, and they don't see the need here.
Mm-hmm.
So this is just to give you some framing on what the project is and what this podcast really is, and now I'm just shipping you back to Objeto. He'll have some questions for you.
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
full of questions. So, Samson, first of all, let me also congratulate you for accepting our invitation to our podcast. But yeah, let's start with the conversation.
Yeah. Thank you for the invite.
About you, how did you get into Bitcoin, and what did you do before Bitcoin?
So, what I did before Bitcoin is also still what I'm doing now. So, originally, I'm a game developer working on RTS games and online games and MMOs, and I'm still doing that. I have a game company called Pixelmatic, and we're building a sci-fi MMO called Infinite Fleet, which is using a lot of stuff from the Liquid blockchain as well. So, there's that, and I've been doing that since 2011. But during my game development career, I also got into Bitcoin, and I kind of had two jobs at the same time. So in 2014, actually, let's go back a bit. So I first heard about Bitcoin in 2011, and then I did a deeper dive in 2013, where I set up my own mining on my laptop, and I followed a guide on how to do it, and that was my orange pill moment when I realized there's nothing behind Bitcoin, like there's no company or person behind
I
it.
can
Anybody
relate to
can
that.
just but it wasn't until I actually went through the process that I understood it, because before that you see Bitcoin mentioned in the news, and it's like something that people use to buy drugs or whatever, right? It's not interesting. But when you actually go through and deep dive, then you kind of understand how it works. So that was my, I guess, my orange pill moment. But I didn't really have enough time to sink into it until probably 2015, late 2014 is when I got into Bitcoin. So that was when I joined BTC China first as an advisor. And then later I became the COO there. So I was running the exchange and mining pool. So that's my Bitcoin rabbit hole orange pill
Yeah,
journey.
your Bitcoin journey. I see. And somewhere in the middle, you got into Blockstream, I guess by 2017, 18. No?
Yeah, so I got pulled into the block size war or the scaling war
Yeah,
while I was at BTC China because we were one of the big mining pools at the time. I think at our peak we were about 18% of network hash rate. So this was when the big blockers were trying to convince the mining pools to use their software to basically fork the network, and that
exactly.
was that was that was I guess the entry point for me because they were reaching out and saying it's time to upgrade to Bitcoin XT. So I kind of had to. I was forced to go into all the details and understand even more about Bitcoin. Um, so that was probably where I met Adam back during the discourse of the fighting and the meetings, and then I came to the realization that it would be good if I could join Blockstream, and Adam had tried to recruit me because I think we needed to work on scaling solutions like layer 2 tech, like Liquid, like Lightning, to counter the narrative that Bitcoin can't scale. Because these days it's like blown out of the water, it's gone. But back
Exactly.
then it was a very, very important discussion. And I think a lot of serious people and companies and investors were buying into that narrative. So the best thing I thought for Bitcoin was to join Blockstream, work with them, bring products to market, and launch all these things and show that Bitcoin does scale. So that's how I got into Blockstream. So I joined in 2017, I think in April or March.
Okay. And in Blockstream, can you tell us a little bit about the projects you've worked with? You've told us you've worked in Liquid and shipping Liquid. You also told us you've made an integration between Liquid and your own business. Yes. So nowadays the debate is almost over. The only people who see the other way of scaling Bitcoin have already gone or lost their funds, hopefully.
Yeah.
And the debate is gone. But back then, in the 2019, back when the Liquid network and the Lightning was really humble, I guess, and and there wasn't too much adoption and outlook on things like how were things going to unfold going forward. Like, would the Lightning be a viable solution, or would we need another scaling solutions to back it up? And I see what you did there with Liquid. Like, you also said and mentioned and you're right as well that talking is not enough. You know, we need to build. In the At that time, most of the people were just talking. And congrats to you and the Blockstream by developing the Liquid network. It was really important back then to show people some of the interesting things that could be built up. And
Mhm.
I think you've played a major role back there with Blockstream and everything. Adam Beck as well. He's a
Yeah,
legend.
for sure. He is.
So let's skip to what matters. And in the context of this podcast and this project, we think about global Bitcoin adoption. Uh, Most importantly, here in Portugal, that's where we live. But I see you were an important figure in building the dream of that happened in El Salvador as an example. And after it got picked by some Bitcoiners, and the president like it wanted to adopt Bitcoin as legal tender. Like, how did you reach him? Like, was it a good interaction at first? Were you scared? And did you see things? Uh, the thing is, some podcasts I listened to you, and you were one of, if not the the guy who told us or mentioned the thing about nation state adoption. You were one of the most important figures in mentioning the nation state adoption of Bitcoin. Most of the people didn't believe it was possible. Like El Salvador proved them wrong. Like,
Yeah.
what was your impact in this process? Like, how did you get into Salvador and in contact with the presidents? And later we'll talk about the Bitcoin bonds. But I wanted
Sure.
to talk about this first.
Yeah, so I believe it was Jack Mallers that first introduced me to the president and his team. So they were planning their announcement of the Bitcoin law, and they wanted some letters of support from Bitcoin companies. So I think Strike wrote one, and then Adam and I wrote one for Blockstream, just saying, we support your initiative, and we believe it's a good thing, and I believe the concern was there be some blowback about from the Bitcoin community and whatnot. So they wanted these, I guess, endorsements that people will support them. So that was what we first started doing, and then there was a series of discussions about how to achieve Bitcoin adoption in the country, how to handle Bitcoin like security wise, and other things that could be potentially done. So in the course of those discussions, I proposed the Bitcoin bonds, the volcano bonds. So before that, it was really just a meme on Twitter where people were saying, Bitcoin bonds with volcano energy.
Yeah,
But I actually worked with my team at Blockstream. We came up with a proposal about how you could actually structure it, how it would make sense, how you could actually pay the coupon, and basically architected the entire thing. And then I also introduced them to Bitfinex. So it's a long and complicated series of discussions that led to the announcement of the bonds and how it would be structured and offered and raised.
what's special about these Bitcoin bonds, and who is it directed for?
I would say it's largely going to be Bitcoiners and people that want to see El Salvador succeed, and also potentially the Salvadoran diaspora that are around the world, so they can now invest back into their country instead of bringing back consumer goods and knickknacks. They can actually contribute by buying a piece of Bitcoin bonds and contribute to the growth and prosperity of their country if they want to do so. But I think another key thing here is that we're also promoting the use of the Liquid network. So the Bitcoin bonds will be issued on Liquid. So that means we give more use cases and basically confirming the proof of concept that you can build unique financial instruments on top of a Bitcoin layer without needing to print a token or do an ICO or something, right? It's
Yeah,
the same principle for both Liquid and Lightning. There's no token involved, but you can innovate on Bitcoin using basically code and tech, and you can actually apply real world use cases. So I think securities has been a big focus when I was at Blockstream to bring them to the Liquid network, because the Liquid network is not decentralized, right? It's a federation. It's run by exchanges and Bitcoin companies, but it is distributed and it's federated, and all the functionaries, which are the 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 boxes that generate the blocks of the network, they're distributed around
yeah.
the world. So it is pretty resilient to any attacks and efforts to control it. It's even Blockstream cannot update the network without everyone manually running an update. So it's a pretty good system with some trade-offs. And again, there's trade-offs in every single system that we build on top of Bitcoin in terms of centralization and decentralization. So I would say the Bitcoin bonds are important because it shows you can use Bitcoin tech to do a Bitcoin backed financial instrument, and you can use that to basically give it to people around the world, and you can pay out the coupon to people that just have, let's say, $100 of the Bitcoin bond, which is really difficult to do at any scale with the traditional instrument. So that's
Yeah,
why
that's right.
the minimum buys for most bonds, like I think consumer level ones, are maybe 1,000, and then they just go up from there to like hundreds of thousands of dollars. So you kind of have this barrier to people. But if you can buy $100 and get your coupon, your dividend every year through Liquid, that's a big game changer, I think.
Yeah. I
Do
also
you
see
have,
it as a
sorry, objective. Do you have
sure,
any
sure.
idea how so they'll be available at Bitfinex, right? So
On Bitfinex
how's
securities.
yeah?
It
So
is a security.
okay, so no, I was just asking. So do you know how's the state of it? So is it like I know there's gonna be I'm a complete finance ignorance, so I'm really dumb at this level. So I know there will be released in waves or in phases, and someone said that the early phase or phase one was already bought. So how can the regular Joe, so someone illiterate, financially illiterate like me, can how can I buy some Bitcoin bonds, some
Okay,
volcano bonds?
so it'd be good to clarify the whole thing. So they are not issued yet. Therefore, no one has bought anything yet. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
it it's still waiting for the new digital
Hmm.
securities laws to be passed in Congress. But just before Christmas, I believe President Bukele sent them to Congress, or the Minister of Economy sent them to Congress. So they're looking at the new laws right now, and once they are passed, then based on those laws, a prospectus and offering document can be written, and I believe that will be done by the Ministry of Finance. They are the issuer of the bond. So once that is out, then I think people will be able to register on Bitfinex Securities, and there will be a period of time for people to read the offering document, understand it, go through the registration process, and then at a later date you can buy it. So there's a long road ahead still until people can actually buy into the bond. And I think the original design that we announced together in 2021, I think that has to be changed. It's probably outdated now because the world has changed a lot. So I'm not sure if the original 6.5% coupon would be enough. Maybe it would need to be increased. And I think there has to be some analysis done on the mining profitability, because that was what would pay the coupon out to the bondholders. So it was $1 billion bond. $500 million would be buying Bitcoin and locking it for 5 years, and then $500 million would be building energy infrastructure and mining operations. So I think that needs to be looked at. I'm not working on that actively right now, but if they when it's ready to be worked on and the offering document has to be put together, I think they have to look at those numbers and see if it still makes sense or rejig it.
Okay. And besides the Bitcoin bonus or coupon, which main differences do you see between Bitcoin bonds and the normal government bonds issued around the world?
Well, the biggest thing I think about this is that these are based on a productive revenue generating activity. So the idea I had was that Bitcoin bonds, there can be many different types of Bitcoin bonds, and Volcano bond is just one subset. So you have Bitcoin bonds here, and then Volcano bonds, but you could potentially have other things like, well, if you're using hydro energy to mine Bitcoin, it'd be hydro bond, and that's something we're talking about with Daniel Eastman in Ecuador.
That
He's
sounds good.
interested to spearhead that. Yeah, but we had some discussions with Prospera. They were also announcing in Miami last year that they were making Bitcoin legal tender. But potentially you could have something like a land-based bond where you buy land and share the upside over time with the bondholders. And maybe the dividend structure would be a bit different. But the key is that any Bitcoin bond, you take half of it and you buy Bitcoin, lock it for 5 years, and share the upside with the buyers of the bond. Um, and the other half has to go into some revenue generating activity that would cover the coupon. And what that activity is, it's still up in the air. But for now, we have mining as a base of that. But potentially it could be other things. Um, but I think we just have to spend more time and try to figure out what those things are. But so the biggest difference is a traditional government bond is just plain debt, right? It's an IOU and backed by full faith and credit of the state. Whereas this one is actually backed by two things. One is a revenue generating activity, and the other is Bitcoin itself. So I believe that is a big change in and of itself, but also the accessibility, like we talked about earlier. You can buy into this thing. It's a bearer bond effectively. So at Blockstream, we have the Blockstream mining note, and then Infinite Fleet also has the EXO token, and these are both security tokens, and they can be kept in your wallet, in your green wallet, or any liquid compatible wallet. So it's another change, which is we're going back to these bearer type assets, because originally
Yeah,
bonds and stocks were actually bearer until
exactly.
we got rug pulled, and now you can't have bearer bonds or bearer stocks. So it's a bit about returning the financial system to the original state, much like Bitcoin is returning money to its original state.
And who has the better bond can receive the coupon, right? Like it was before in the Wild Wild West.
Mhm,
People carried around the government bonds.
mhm.
So, by being the first mover, we can all agree that El Salvador has an advantage over most of the countries around the world. But how does this Bitcoin bond sets the world stage for other countries looking to adopt the same strategy of financing their debt and their expenses?
Well, I think the key thing here is that El Salvador has to launch it first. A lot of countries are waiting on the sidelines and trying to see what happens with El Salvador, because they've all, like, no one's blind. Everyone's seeing when El Salvador did their Bitcoin law and they did their Bitcoin bonds announcement, they have a massive amount of attacks coming at them from the U.S. government, from the mainstream media, et cetera, et cetera. So there, right now, there's like uh, a pain in addition to the gain. So they have gains because they've increased their GDP, boosted tourism, boosted investments in the country. But at the same time, you're getting massive amounts of attacks on a number of levels too. So I think a lot of countries are just waiting on the sidelines and seeing um, what the big benefit will be. And I think if they can successfully raise $1 billion and prove the concept that Bitcoin bonds work, I think that will push a lot of countries over the edge and push them towards doing Bitcoin as legal tender and potentially doing their own bonds as well to raise capital and get out of the debt cycle.
Yeah. So we had a question popping up. So in 2023, what more countries will we see adopting Bitcoin? So and the follow up is, my bet is on a small country.
Yeah, well, it's difficult to say, but 2023 and the years coming are interesting because
I
in
bet
Latin
they're
America,
probably waiting for what comes out of El Salvador, maybe, no?
maybe, but maybe not, because what we're trying to do at Jan 3, so this is the new company I started after I left Blockstream. The focus is on accelerating hyper-Bitcoinization and mass adoption of Bitcoin, but also working with governments in an advisory capacity, or just providing information as we can. But 2023 and beyond is interesting. So there are a lot of elections happening in Latin America. So in 2023, you have Argentina, and there's an interesting candidate there named Milei.
Yeah, I
And
saw.
Javier Milei, yeah.
he's very interesting. Then you have Guatemala also in 2023, and Zuri Rios is potentially one of the candidates. She delivered an address to Bitcoiners during the Lugano conference. I played it while I was on stage, and she didn't mention the word Bitcoin, but obviously she prepared a message to Bitcoiners, and it's likely going to be a component of the campaigning or the messaging around the campaign. And then in 2024, you have the halving. And also in 2024, you have re-elections in El Salvador. And if President Bukele is reelected, that's another show that Bitcoin policy and a Bitcoin standard is a good thing, right? It's demonstrating stability and continuance. Then
It
also in 2024,
reinforces his move, right? His
yeah,
take on Bitcoin.
yeah. Also 2024 is Panama, Mexico, and Uruguay. So you can see there's like almost a domino effect of
Yeah.
Bitcoin policy that's going to bleed into all of these campaigns, right? In Mexico, you have Senator Indira Kempis, who's pushing for this and speaking very vocally about Bitcoin adoption and banking the unbanked. So I believe Bitcoin and financial freedom are just going to be key topics for all of these elections in all of these countries. So I don't know which one, but we'll
They
push
will
as much
come
as we can. Yeah, we'll
in
push
due
as
just have
much
to
as
time.
we can.
be
In due time.
yeah, you just have to
But
be hopeful.
but Brazil is doing interesting things too, and they made Bitcoin.
I think Brazil is going down the is going down the drain in the next years. So
We'll see,
I
but
won't be
still,
too hopeful with
it's
this
still
new president. And well, I'm not gonna comment on that, but I think things are going south.
we'll have to see. But you know, Bitcoin does interesting things during interesting times. So if
Yeah,
there's change, there's an opportunity there too. Like in Game of Thrones, what did they say? Chaos is a ladder.
Oh, okay. So about chaos, let's talk about the effects of the domino effect. So we talked about other countries adopting the same strategy as El Salvador, but there's a gap here in the middle. Where does the IMF and the World Bank fit into this? Like, are they becoming irrelevant?
Well, I think so, but they're still very entrenched and they're very big organizations with a lot of influence. So I don't think they're going away tomorrow. They'll still be around, and it doesn't seem like they want countries to adopt the Bitcoin standard because that runs counterintuitive to their whole lending game. So they're going to fight this, and ultimately Bitcoin will win because it's more powerful and it cannot be stopped. But still, it's going to be annoying as they publish their little informational pieces and try to influence policy.
Yeah, sure. Now let's head to our big topic of discussion today. There is our region, our small region of Madeira here in Portugal, that belongs to Portugal by now. Uh, so you were one of the people responsible for bringing the President Miguel Albuquerque to the Miami to the Bitcoin Miami conference. How did you two meet, and what's your relationship with the president?
So everything is through Andre Loja. He's a local pleb in Madeira, and he's the one that made it all happen. So it would not have happened without his efforts and drive. But I think there's a lot of people involved in bringing the president to Miami. Daniel Prince was one of them. Knut, he's also another one of them. But there's a lot of people were working behind the scenes to make it happen. It was touch and go, and we weren't sure if it was going to happen. But things seem to align in a good way for Bitcoin sometimes, and it just all materialized at the end of the day. So I think it was a great event, great announcement, and it's promising for Madeira and Portugal. Hello? Did I lose you guys?
No, I'm still here.
No, I was
Okay.
muted. So about Madeira and the president, can you tell us how he sees Bitcoin and how it could help Madeira going forward into this adoption phase?
Well, I think for him, it's a way to bring more prosperity to Madeira. And I think that is probably what a lot of politicians are looking at Bitcoin as. I can't say, like, does he fully understand Bitcoin, all the mechanics, and has he gone down the rabbit hole? I think Andre's working on that, but it's going to take time. But I don't think that's the most important part. It's the hope that Bitcoin can bring prosperity, which is more important, because that is what most normal people around the world, most normies, or your average Joe, are going to understand Bitcoin as. They don't need to understand all the details at once, but if they understand this is how you fix civilization, you fix human civilization and restore it to former glory. It's fixing the money. I think that is the most important step. And that's the thing that we should focus on because it's the easiest way to reach people. So I believe for him, it's a way to bring in more tourism, bring in more businesses. I believe there's like a sort of international financial center where they want companies to set up. So these are things that Andre and the Free Madeira group, they're working to do, like education, onboarding merchants, and looking at new opportunities, potentially doing a conference there too. But there's a lot of things in the cards, but the key is to drive more economic activity at Madeira.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but the thing is, yeah, and I'm really hopeful for Madeira, but at the end of the day, they are still Portuguese territory, which is part of the EU.
Yeah.
So, and as much as I would like to have a Portuguese escape in Madeira, so I don't. How do you see it? How do you see Madeira play out with with this part of being part of Portugal and the EU? I know Madeira has some freedoms in legislation, but is still on a leash, you know.
Yeah. So I mean, it's a mixed bag. There's no perfect scenario for Bitcoin adoption. Even if you look at El Salvador, there's like I said before, there's constant attacks, right?
Yeah.
It's the adoption of Bitcoin and the fixing of the money is going to be a battle. There's no easy way. It's not like suddenly all of Europe is going to adopt Bitcoin and everything's going to be perfect, right? There has to be some gradual process. So the director of operations at Jan3, his name is Doogie. He's a former Royal Marine, and like he phrased it in an interesting way, which is, if you look at things, El Salvador is like a beachhead for Bitcoin adoption. So if you go back to like World War II, when you're trying to storm Normandy, right, you have you have to take part of the beach first, and there are a lot of enemies on the cliffs and inland, but you have to take the beach first, or else you can't really progress. But El Salvador is a beachhead for Bitcoin adoption globally. But what we have in Madeira is a beachhead in the EU. So yes, it is a part of the EU because it's a part of Portugal. But at the same time, you have to think of it from the perspective of pushing forward, which is we have a beachhead. So in an ideal world, I would snap my fingers and the entire EU would adopt Bitcoin. But that's not going to happen. But we have a small bit of hope. We have a little pocket there, which is Madeira, which can potentially influence the mainland, Portugal, and then beyond. And then you have another little stronghold in Lugano, which is being driven by Paulo Arduino from Tether and Bitfinex. So he's pushing hard in Switzerland. So you kind of have a few pockets. But if you think about it and you play out the scenario of nation-state Bitcoin adoption in your mind, this is how it happens. It has to happen organically from grassroots initiatives and with collaboration with governments, because the governments are not going to disappear instantly either. I think that's another thing that people kind of don't factor into their thinking, which
People
is there are
fantasize about it.
yeah, you're like I do too, but the reality is it's not going away. So you have to have the grassroots part, but you also have to work with the policymakers and see if you can get good policy coming out of them.
Yeah.
And the best way is to make them understand money and the connection between Bitcoin and prosperity. So I would say this is how it's going to work. It's going to be gradual, it's going to be messy, and it's never going to be ideal. We're trying to fix a very broken world. Like, I'm pretty sure
Yeah,
you guys are aware.
this is
It's very broken.
we are very aware, especially in Portugal, and um, this is where someone like you and Gentry could come up and advise our government, because unlike the states, where uh, uh, like the states have some legislatory, or I don't know the word in English, but they have some freedom, but they are still under the federal umbrella, right? And especially in Texas and or whatever. So Europe is a bit different, and we are part of the European Union, but every country has does his thing. Lynn Allen talked about it. on Peter McCormick's podcast a few months ago, and I, the we passed a new law on the budget this year for this year, and the advisory for the government on that law. So one of the advisors. So just so you see how important it is, the work that you are trying to do with Gen 3. So the advisor for the government that passed the budget for this year runs an NFT company.
Hmm.
So, and now you get Bitcoin taxed at 28% in Portugal, but NFTs don't pay taxes.
Hmm.
I'm not saying anything. I'm not pointing fingers, but
Yeah.
you see how this goes. So it's
Hmm.
not only it's important to work with governments and whoever makes the legislation and whatnot, but it's important to um,
Bring the right people to the group.
choose the right people to do it, because else you are or else you were trapped on a
Yeah.
shitcoin hell or
Hmm.
something like
We
that.
cannot play this game by hiding.
Yeah,
Hiding is not a solution.
pretty
We need
much. Yeah,
to
like it's the same case everywhere. So in the UK, they have these evidence sessions. So I was at the UK Bitcoin conference last year, and I was on a panel with one of the MPs there, Dr. Lisa Cameron. So she's heading up their cryptocurrency and Bitcoin working group. But there are these evidence sessions where you present to Parliament. And I believe some of the evidence sessions, they had people there from Ripple, basically representing the industry and trying to influence policy. So it's the same story everywhere. We have to, as Bitcoiners, go out and do things. Like, yeah, we can just stack and hodl and sit on the beach, but it's not changing that much, right? I mean, if everyone did that, yes, but not everyone is doing that. So some of us have to go out there and do the job of engaging with politicians, trying to educate them about what Bitcoin is, what really a CBDC is, and trying to inject some of the first principle type thinking into their mindset and how help them reach the same conclusions that we've reached. But yeah, it's an effort. It's a two-pronged effort. You need the grassroots adoption. You need people like you guys and Bitcoin Beach and Bitcoin everything. Like there's lots of little Bitcoin
Yeah.
grassroots
It-
initiatives, but without that, it doesn't really work. So we saw in the Central African Republic that they passed the Bitcoin law, but then they went to make their own shitcoin, the Sango thing,
yeah.
right? And talking to the French delegation that went there physically, there's just no grassroots Bitcoin movement there anchoring and keeping them honest and keeping them on track. So this is why you need both things. Like one in isolation is not going to work. Like if a country
it's
just
kind of
makes Bitcoin legal tender and there's no real Bitcoin movement there or adoption
yes,
there,
yes.
it's not going to work either.
In fact,
Yeah.
that El Salvador went to legal tender after El Zonte and after Bitcoin Beach,
Yeah.
the Bitcoin Beach project. So it's kind of what we are trying to do here, like educate on what is Bitcoin, what is a CBDC, what are the risks, what and all that. And Objeto doesn't uh, show his face, so he's keeping his OPSEC. But yeah, everybody knows me. I usually don't show my face also, but I'm gonna start doing it. But I was already doxed, and I'm not at the stage of I'm not at the stage of talking to politicians yet. But
Yeah.
at least locally, I try to to engage in that level or reach that level of engagement with the local powers.
Hmm. I
And
think it's important. It's important. And if I could do it all over again, I would be anonymous, but it's too late for me.
Yeah, I say that also. If I looking back, I would just don't reveal myself. But yeah, so
about
it's done. It's done.
Yeah, sure.
Somebody has to do it.
Yeah, someone has to. About the good, the good, the good example we have. It's like what happened in Canada right after the protests. Like we had the Polyev making a big turn into Bitcoin and talking a lot about it and showing people how it could be used against the surveillance state. And yeah, I guess it is a good example what Bitcoiners can do. If we manage to bring people to our side like Polyev, I think we have a good chance of fighting the people in IMF and the World Bank. And
Yeah.
now we'll make a recent dodge to we're in Madeira, but now let's move to the Eurozone. Uh, do you think there's the risk? Like the question is around the how do you see the game unfolding in the Euro region? Like, is there a risk of it utterly collapsing and like some countries like Italy, Portugal, or Spain, Greece, like revamping their finance strategy around Bitcoin? Like, how do you see things unfolding in the Euro region? Because there is a lot of noise here. Like, we see Lugano in Switzerland, but I think it is not enough. There are some ground movements in Italy and Spain and Portugal like ours,
Yeah.
but I think the main incentive and for states to adopt Bitcoin in the Euro region will be the collapse of it. And, how do you see this thing? Do you have the same opinion as me, or do you see it as-
Yeah,
in a different way?
potentially. I mean, the Euro region is not doing very well. I mean, it's doing very poorly. So I would say collapse is inevitable, and collapse of any region that's based on a fiat standard is also inevitable. We've seen it. All you have to do is look at human history. You can see fiat currencies don't last long, and then empires built on fiat currencies don't last that long either. The problem is people are very short-sighted, and they don't look out, and they don't look at history either. But history shows us that none of this works, and pretending it works doesn't really do anything. You're just ignoring the fire that's burning. So, I mean, there's a few possibilities. One could be people break off and leave the eurozone, and they become sovereign again and take control of their own money. But at the same time, the eurozone's trying to increase its reach and size too, right? They just brought on Croatia, and God bless the poor Croatians and their new shitcoin euro. But
Yeah,
it's going to be a difficult thing to play out. And I would say overall, I don't have that much hope for Europe, just because Europe has done so many stupid things over the
true.
last few decades that it's just mind blowing. Like, you gutted your own energy production, and you've implemented a lot of policies that just crush the economy, and a lot of it has to do with not understanding that money is money. So you've turned money into a surveillance tool, and this is what you get. Because if you can't transact with money, then other things become money, or people opt out, and they leave completely and go somewhere else. So it's just like the entire concept of how to operate a country and how to operate a prosperous country is just lost. It's you've assumed that if you show up in parliament and you do a few things, then everything is good, and you take some photos. But the reality is you need good people doing hard work, and you need to do things like generate energy and have economies. Like, the whole COVID thing kind of exposed the lack of critical thinking
Yeah.
on a lot of these governments. Like, how do you expect the economy to work if you shut down everything? It doesn't. So I mean, you have to accept there are trade-offs. There are always trade-offs in life, and Bitcoin is a great illustrator of that, right? If you study Bitcoin, if you've gone through the scaling wars and whatnot, you understand there are trade-offs. Like, if you speed up this thing, then you lose some decentralization. If you make the blocks bigger, you lose this, and there's always a trade-off. And
Yeah.
what I feel is that people in the world today have forgotten that there are trade-offs and there are realities. If you have no
Everything is
energy,
free. Everything is free.
yeah,
It
everything is
comes
free, but
it
everything is
comes
not free.
from the rainbows and the unicorns in the sky.
Yeah, well,
Yeah. So
this is the
you
thing.
see,
It's
I'm in
free.
Europe. I'm in Europe inside my house, and I'm with the hat, and I'm just not like this
Pini.
because I don't want to look bad on the video.
Mhm.
Okay, so fuck you, Putin. This is my fuck you, Putin moment because I'm not turning up the heat. So it's like you say. So we don't have energy, and we gave it up, and we it's unthinkable. This I don't I can
Yeah.
even understand what's on these politicians' mind. So
Because
unelected
they don't understand.
politicians' minds.
It's understanding the trade-off. So yeah, it's like everything is free when you can print money, but the question is how long can you print money for, right? So they're right in that it's all free, but they're wrong because you can't keep printing money. So this is where we face
There's
reality
no
when
free
you
lunches.
yeah, there's no
Yeah.
free lunches. So you face back to reality when you realize that it doesn't work, and the the reality of things not working will hit you fast. Like there's no heat, because that's reality. So you have to relearn that we need energy, and you have to also learn there are costs to produce things and what work is. So there's a lot of things that people have to relearn. We've just been so coddled, and we just expect
Yes,
everything
yes.
is magical,
We are
but it's not.
softened. At least in Europe, I think we are softened for like I don't know, 50 years, 60 years, 70 years without wars and without yeah, basically without war because like someone said, I don't know whether I read it, but peace is not the natural state. So there's always
Well, we can peace should be the natural state, and I think having
yes, yes,
a
yes.
Bitcoin standard will help to reach that. But
Yeah.
I think this is why we should try to accelerate Bitcoin adoption, because that can, soften the fall. Like instead of everything collapsing and we're living in the dark ages again with war and poverty and death everywhere, we can slowly ease the world into a Bitcoin standard. And this is what we're trying to accomplish, because we think
Yes, I read your post on Bitcoin Magazine, maybe,
yeah.
and you were talking about it, how how we can avoid, at least at some extent, the war and the poverty and the misery, and by
Yeah.
adopting a Bitcoin standard and the world coming together as in a Bitcoin standard, like we had the gold standard. So
Hmm.
Bitcoin is just better.
Yeah.
Yeah. And about that, we know you play a major role on that transition, and some of the questions that come to our heads and from the audience as well, like, is there any possibility of Africa and South America leapfrogging Europe and the rest of the world on this race towards Bitcoin adoption?
Yeah, it's very possible because they're open to economic development. Like they there's no war there, but there's a basically economic war, right? They're facing massive inflation. So
What do they
they're
have to
more
lose?
yeah, well they don't have much to lose, but then they also have their eyes open to the reality of the world, right? So being in the West, being from Canada or the US or Europe, you're not really seeing the world as it is, but they're seeing the reality. So it's easier for people in those regions to adopt Bitcoin because they see like, well, when my money is inflating away and I'm wheelbarrowing it around, there's a problem. And I can't even get a bank account because I don't have all the ID and the fixed address.
Yeah.
That's a problem. But these things you don't really encounter in Western countries for the most part, because it all works until it doesn't work. But they have that advantage, and I believe the governments there want economic activity, right? If they're like El Salvador, they want that growth. And the key to that growth is recognizing money is money, because how do you grow an economy? You can't just keep taxing people. That's just trying to squeeze more blood from a stone that doesn't
Exactly.
have blood. So you have to grow. You have to build things. You have to be attractive. You have to bring in more talent, bring in investment, bring in entrepreneurs. Basically, the world is a free market that's limited in several ways, but by like movement, mobility, the ability to immigrate, etc. But barring those, if like El Salvador makes it easy to immigrate, if Argentina makes it easy to immigrate, and they have safe conditions, then they're going to grow faster than in the EU, right? Like you look at some scenes of Paris, like it looks like it's a war zone, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
There's just no concept of the foundational things you need for civilization almost. So if they can clean things up, reduce crime, make it safe, and that's exactly what El Salvador has been doing, they're going to bring in talent and investment and capital. And people will buy property, they'll invest, they'll bring their families, and you'll grow the economy. But yeah, like Europe has to understand these things and relearn a lot of the things that seem to be very common sense. And then there
Yeah.
might be a chance.
Uh,
But
one,
until
one
that
of,
happens, who
yeah,
knows?
go ahead. So I was just saying, just one of I can't leave right now from here, from Europe,
Mhm.
from Portugal, just because I can't right now. As family, kids, whatever. But if I could, I would
Yeah.
be in El Salvador like 6 months ago. So yeah. So
Yeah.
I'm really fed up of this. Uh, I don't even know if this is socialism, communism,
It's
tyranny,
communism.
whatever. But so I'm just fed up of this. So
Yeah, but I hear a lot of that sentiment from a lot of people I know in Europe. They're all thinking the same thing as you. They're all wondering like, what's the future? And that's pretty bad
if you
considering,
if you
Europe.
start opening Argentina, El Salvador, Brazil,
Yeah.
Mexico, and cleaning up, like you say, or even in Africa, and I bet a lot of Europeans, probably Canadians and Americans, will start thinking about about moving, and so it's just like vote with your feet, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Well, this is really how it's going to play out. Like they'll be forced to make a change either through collapse or
Yeah.
through realization. But it's either one or the other because that's the only those are the only two ways that it goes. There's no third way. Well, the third way is
there's no
Bitcoin
second
adoption,
best.
but that's also tied to waking up and realizing it, right?
Yes.
And and that brings us to our last question. That is about Gen 3 or January 3, as I like to call it. uh, is there anything special with the name? What does the name like?
It's
Out?
just a nod to the Genesis block day, so January 3rd.
Yeah,
Okay,
I think
okay,
it's
nice name then. And
Yeah. There's
so we
also
had
a
we had a
venture capital firm, 1031, which is the white paper, October 31st.
yeah.
those are
So
nice names for Bitcoin
we had
companies.
a question from a pleb in the chat, uh, and he was asking if Gentry is taking plebs or as openings. I see you don't have openings at the moment for job openings, but are you thinking about it or not, or
Well, we'll see
will it
later.
come
Right
in the
now,
future?
we're still working out some details, and we're still trying to finish Aqua. That's our wallet. So once we get the ball rolling, we'll probably open up more. But there's a lot of people that are just in the community that do talk to us regularly, and they're really just trying to coordinate with us on the nation state stuff and help us get meetings or bring up interesting things to discuss. So it's really just helping Bitcoin and helping Bitcoin get adopted in more places. So you don't really need to work for Jan 3. You can still collaborate with us. And at the
Exactly.
end of the day, we can't really do anything ourselves. Like I said, like Madeira is Andre Loja, right? So without him, it wouldn't happen. We're just sort of a coordination node. People can reach out and we can potentially route them to other people, or they bring things and we discuss and open up new opportunities. But by ourselves, we can't really do that much. I don't know everyone in the world, and
You are just routing connections.
yeah, we're an
You're
Oster relay.
routing or that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a saying. There's a saying around that thing you just mentioned that says you can go fast but not far. But if you want to go far, you have to go together or find a group that thinks like you.
Yeah,
And I think we have a group just like that around Bitcoiners and maximalists. So, Samson, that makes all of the questions I had for you. I want to thank you for your time and for participating or collaborating with the A Seita Bitcoin project. And I hope we meet again soon, but in a real place, not in the
Flash.
interwebs.
yeah.
And
Let's meet in Madeira.
when you come here to Madeira or even Portugal, we will make plans to see this little corner of Europe at Bitcoin. At least that's what I
Sounds
hope
good.
for. And yeah, I don't think if do you have any questions for Samson, Tiago?
No, I'm done.
That's all. Okay, so
Yeah.
Samson, huge thank you,
Okay.
and
Thanks, guys.
Yes.
a nice one, guys.
Again, thank you so much. Just let me just finish. Thank you so much for again. Thank you for accepting the invitation and being here, talking to our meager audience and come to our humble podcast. And let's hope people, if they don't know about it now, will learn about it in the near future,
Yeah.
and they come back and see your contribution to Bitcoin and the podcast. Thank you.
We're spreading the signal here.
All right.
Let's keep it up.
Thank you.
That's all
Thanks,
for me.
guys.
Yeah, for me too. Malta, até a próxima semana
Uma boa noite.
e boa noite. Não percam o próximo episódio, que nós também não. E fechamos assim.
Bye bye.
Vai,
Okay.
tchau.
Bye, guys. Thanks.